Hey guys, Jedi Dragon King here, and I'm finally, at long last, gonna nail down the 100 sub video. How about that? But this is gonna be a special one. It's not gonna be my usual Dead by Daylight gameplay. It's gonna be something else. I'm going to be doing a readout of a killer concept that I found on Reddit. I'll be leaving a screenshot of the Reddit user's name, and I'll be linking his Reddit profile down below in the description, so you can go check him out, more of his stuff. I mean, he doesn't comment, he doesn't post a lot, but he does comment occasionally. But I think he'll post some more stuff that's worthwhile, I think. But this is a creation of his, or her, I'm not sure, that I'd like to highlight in a video. And before I go into it, I have to say that I don't have his permission to do this, her permission, whichever, but I hope that giving credit in the description and within the video will make up for that. Alright, without further ado, let's get into it. To start off, I'd like to look at the name and the backstory of this particular killer. The way I'm going to do it is I'm going to take screenshots and condense those screenshots down into paragraph by paragraph parts that I'll record over, read over, and then give my video reactions to afterward. So, without further ado, let's get into it. As you can see, the killer's name in the entity's realm is called the Shadow, but her real name is Charmaine von Brandt. When Charmaine von Brandt was 7 years old, her mother died after months of being horribly sick. She was buried in the family tomb behind the looming von Brandt castle, which had been built over a century ago, and was currently in possession of her father, a powerful baron. Charmaine did not cry as her mother was placed in her grave. So, with that, you have a tragic childhood. And not only that, she showed no emotion when her own mother was lowered into her grave. Yeah. Our Charmaine is already looking like she's going to be very remorseless. Servants were often uneasy around her, though her quiet nature was often a welcome break from the loud and arrogant berates from the rest of the family. Those who tended to know her knew there was something sinister about the young woman. Her voice was soft and calm, yet terrible and menacing. Her cold, dark eyes and sly smile often sent shivers down the spine of those in her presence. As she grew older, she grew to an impressive height, further adding to her imposing stature. She rarely spoke. Her eyes seemed to speak for her, but in a way that was almost impossible for others to understand. There was something going on behind those eyes, and all who saw it feared of what it might be, and could only pray that they would be spared, never whatever it was unleashed itself upon the world. So, to summarize that little bit, she already has this air of wickedness about her that makes people uneasy, and she's just... she already has these signs of evil, just pure evil, like it was born within her. Yeah, not the kind of killer you want to feel remorse for. Charmaine was a bright student, driven by a thirst for knowledge. She spent a great deal of time in her uncle's laboratory deep within the von Brandt estate, reading books on science and philosophy. Her uncle was impressed by the girl's sharp mind and often let her help in his experiments, much to the chagrin of his own son, Percy. Charmaine dissected frogs, mixed chemicals, and observed and documented everything in her diary, where she often reflected on everything she had learned. So, Charmaine does have her virtues. She's a gatherer of knowledge, judging by that little paragraph. And she's going against the mold for women of her time, which is astounding. But it's what happens next that but completely just unravels all that. At some point in her studies, Charmaine began to take an interest in the idea of the human soul. The quote-unquote soul was at the heart of many religious texts, as well as some philosophical ones. But as a woman of science, revered dogma and logical discussion were simply not enough. Charmaine desired to observe a human soul, to observe it with her own eyes, this mystical energy that supposedly lived inside of every human, no matter how powerful or lowly. After many months of attempting to devise an experiment to test the theory of the soul, Charmaine made an observation. Often when taking the life of something, whether a frog in her father's laboratory, uncle's laboratory, or a fox, she loved to hunt and had gone with her father on many occasions, Charmaine had always felt something grow inside her, a strange but powerful sensation that was often fleeting. She could not dismiss this as simply her own pleasure. While she did enjoy taking life, it did not excite her or arouse any strong emotion. She wondered if her own soul was somehow reacting to some form of energy when another soul lost its life. It was a strange theory, but souls were strange concepts, and Charmaine set out to test her hypothesis. But no ordinary creature would do. A human was necessary. Oh joy, human experimentation! Lovely. Her and the doctor would get along swimmingly. But that aside, of course, as a woman of science, she's going to want a logical explanation as to why the soul exists. That's par for the course for scientists. They always want an explanation for something, which is understandable. But the fact that she feels nothing, just nothing, for everything that she kills, that's serial killer behavior. The fact that she's dissecting these animals and feeling nothing, just, again, serial killer behavior. But I do admire that she is trying to find an explanation for what the human soul is, but the way she's doing it is just not good. It just ain't it, Chief. Using her family's position of power and wealth, Charmaine was able to gather a group of men who would bring her healthy victims at her whim. They would be brought at nightfall and dragged to the bowels of the von Brandt castle. Charmaine deduced that something transpired in the body of a living soul around the time of their death. Her uncle, the only member of the family to know about the arrangement, initially protested, but after the first experiment, he objected no further. He had felt it too. The experiment had been botched, the death meant to be quick and precise, but was slow and excruciating due to inefficient tools. However, this accident provided extraordinary results far beyond Charmaine's expectations. Pain and fear caused a human body to burst with strange energy that flowed through their blood. Charmaine was able to extract this strange energy into a vial and consumed it eagerly, much to her uncle's alarm. Strength and vitality, the likes of which she had never experienced, coursed through the young woman's body, and she became capable of physical feats that she was not prior, despite her already fit physique. Her uncle saw a possibility to greatly expand the family's position by selling the cosmic vial to the nobility. More experiments were conducted, more vials were made, and more innocent people were kidnapped. Servants whispered of horrible happenings going on in the dungeons deep below, but the rest of the family ignored them. Until Percy, Charmaine's cousin, it says nephew, but approached her in her father's study. He knew about the kidnappings and murder and torture. Charmaine's father was aging fast, and it was clear that he intended to leave his legacy to his daughter. Percy saw an opportunity to remove Charmaine from the lineage and secure the position as head of the family for himself. Confident in his own abilities, Percy was certain that he had her cornered. Charmaine took a poker from the fireplace and stabbed it through his shoulder. As he struggled, shrieked, begged, and pleaded, Charmaine guided and dragged the stumbling man towards the fireplace and thrust him into the flames, holding him down with a poker as he was engulfed. It was when she first heard its voice. So, we see a little bit of Elizabeth Bathory in the first part, where she's able to accumulate people to experiment on. And with Elizabeth Bathory, she collected girls to drain of their blood so she could make herself younger. But there's also a bit of that in when Charmaine collects the energy of the person that she tortured and drinks it, gaining power from it. And her uncle aided her. Like, dude, really? And the rest of the family also was like, who gives a crap? Only the servants were paying any mind. Until Charmaine's cousin, Percy, came along. Says it's her nephew, but no. And even he was only doing it like, oh, I'm gonna get her out of the way so I can take her with the family. He wasn't even doing it out of concern for any of the people. He was just doing it for his own ambition, to get her out of the way. Like, the von Brandt family was very messed up. And it's shown even more when she kills Percy. And that final bit with the voice. I think we all know enough about Dead by Daylight lore that we know what that voice was. Entity. Today, a servant arrived in a nearby town, covered in blood and screaming about horrible massacre. A militia was formed and headed to the castle to investigate. What they found horrified them. The von Brandts, as well as their staff of servants, had been murdered, most of them terribly mutilated. The man eventually ventured into the laboratory deep below and found Charmaine von Brandt standing over her disemboweled uncle. Only 2 men survived the encounter, and they spread tales that Charmaine von Brandt had become possessed by some terrible evil. A larger group was assembled, but when they returned to the castle, they found it ablaze. No attempt was made to save it. A manhunt was launched, but Charmaine von Brandt was never found, seen, or heard from again. Pages from her uncle's logs were found, detailing their experiments in grotesque detail. The story of Charmaine von Brandt became a local ghost story, with legends born of her capturing local denizens to continue her unholy experiments. The von Brandt castle, meanwhile, stands abandoned, with locals calling it damned. And so, Charmaine's story came to an end, with brutal murder, as it did with all of the other killers who entered the entity's realm. With all the experiments, I have this headcanon, and I think the original author brought it up too, that she's the entity's personal torturer, twisting the killers into weapons for the entity's service. Adds a little depth, I think. Well, I mean, would add a little depth to the entity and its lore to have its own servant, lieutenant, doing its bidding directly. Which is why, it would explain why Charmaine hasn't been seen or heard from within the realms of the entity or in DBD canon. Just a thought. But with that aside, I'm going to go into her base description and Benedict Baker's description and leave off with a little end note, because the rest is just her mechanics and add-ons, and I'll leave a link to the main story and a screenshot of other things in the main video, so that you guys can view the rest at your leisure. But that aside, let's get into the description. Shadow, as the name implies, is a tall, shadowy figure, covered in darkness that emits from her in a cloudy way similar to ink and water. She possesses a dark heart and soul, one that she carried in life, where she took the lives of many innocent people before being taken by the entity. Her arrival into the dreary realm of the entity was not involuntary. She did not shy from its touch, but embraced it with malevolent passion. It is unknown if the entity is capable of love, but it is clear the darkness in the Shadow's heart has earned her a special place in its dark world. Dressed in garb from Victorian England, it is clear she is a long-time killer of the realm. Because of her darkness, she is more susceptible to the flashlight. She is easier to blind and can be burned while using her power. So that bit right there kind of confirms to me that she does have this special place within the entity's realm, possibly as its torturer. Because why else would that be added in? That the entity feels, alluding to that, the entity feels this special connection. It's too uncanny. And the fact that she is just so evil, that she's embraced the entity in a way that not even some of the other more brutal killers ever could, further shows that. And I like how her garb suggests the time she came from, Victorian England. That's a nice bit of lore right there. Nice bit of lore. And finally, the flashlight. The fact that it can hurt her, that's nuts. That would be a totally unique mechanic to Dead by Daylight. That having the flashlight not only just merely blind the killer, but actively hurt the killer. I mean, that would be kind of broken, sort of, but it would just be for her. And the power would probably have to balance out. Her power would have to balance out in order to accommodate for that. But yeah, that's her description. Now for Benedict's.
I have met many terrors in my travels through the fog. Ever since I set foot in this wretched realm of nightmares, I've had the feeling that the killers who dwell here are not much different from those they hunt. They are merely pawns, just like us. Things to be used and manipulated until they are of no use and discarded. But today, I have seen something that challenged that assumption. A lady, draped in shadows that drip from her like dark smoke, or ink that is spilled in water. I encountered this fiend the first time in one of the trials in the woods, but she was not the one hunting us. I caught sight of her as one of my fellow victims was captured and dragged off by one of the other beasts. She observed the scene, as I have many times. A long cavalry sword sheathed at one side of her hip, a whip rolled in the other. The whip shimmered with the strange energy that I have identified belonging to the entity. Then her head turned towards me, and, for a horrible moment, her eyes, which were blood-red against her darkened form, met mine. A grin stretched on her lips, and then she turned and disappeared into the fog. Has she always been there? Lurking in the shadows of the fog? Watching? For what? I'm worried that I may have found a fiend who is more than a mere pawn.
I especially like Benedict's description like that. The fact that she's just watching another killer in action, like, another one of my experiments, doing something. Maybe that could be. It would certainly fit the scientist role. I mean, just her doing that. Not actively trying to pursue anybody, just watching. Seeing an experiment unfold. and that turned towards Benedict, like she somehow knew he was there, even though nobody else ever does. Nobody else has ever seen Benedict except her. And she just smiled at him like she knew something that he didn't. And disappearing into the fog, like, how long had she been there? Watching. Just watching. Just beyond the field of view, watching everything unfold. That would be especially creepy, if true. I want you guys to take that to heart a little bit, maybe as your own little way to make things interesting in game. Just be like, look at the fog at the edge of the map and be like, is there something watching me? But yeah, that is Charmaine von Brandt, the Shadow. A killer unique among killers in that she's probably an order higher than they are in ranking amongst the entity's pets. Just a thought. With that, I'll close with screenshots of her, the original author, and I will leave a link to the full story, her full profile, in the description, as well as the link to the author's subreddit. I hope you all enjoyed. If you do, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And be on the lookout for future gameplay videos. So ends my 100 sub video. God bless. Jedi Dragon King, out. Also, a little afterthought, right as I do the goodbyes. For those of you who know about my Chronicles series on Reddit, once I finally get back to writing about that series, she's definitely going to get featured. For sure. Even made a Reddit post about it a while back. But yeah, that's all I wanted to say.